I was still holding her shoes when she asked the question. 11:47 p.m., Philadelphia. The hallway light outside Sophie Bennett's apartment flickered once and then held steady. The kind of tired fluorescent that made everything look slightly later than it was. Her blue dress, chosen carefully I could tell, for a night that was supposed to matter, was damp along the hem from the long walk. Mascara had smudged just enough under her eyes to turn the evening into something she would not want photographed. My coat sat on her shoulders the way it had for the last 12 blocks, sleeves too long, collar turned up against a wind that had already done whatever damage it intended. Ryan was supposed to take her to the restaurant where they had their first date. He was supposed to meet her parents afterward. He was supposed to talk about the future in the careful, promising language people use when they are about to make something official. Instead, he sent a 3-word text 40 minutes after he was meant to walk through the door. Something came up. I had watched her sit at that corner table alone, phone face down, water glass untouched, while the server made a second polite pass, and then a third. I had been 2 blocks away, finishing a late client call, when her name lit up my screen. By the time I reached the restaurant, a woman neither of us knew was already standing beside Sophie's chair, voice low and almost apologetic. "Are you waiting for Ryan too?" That was the sentence that ended the performance. I got her out of there. I called a car. She looked at the waiting sedan and shook her head. So we walked. Almost 2 miles through the kind of late spring damp that settles into fabric and refuses to leave. She took her heels off somewhere near 18th Street because the straps had started to cut. I carried them without comment. I did not say, "I told you so." I did not ask how long she had been sitting there before she finally called me. I did not offer any version of the speech that began with, "You deserve better." I simply matched her pace and let the city do the talking for both of us. At her door, I held out the key she had dropped into my coat pocket 3 blocks earlier. "Text me when you're inside." Sophie didn't take the key. She looked at me the way she looked at a draft that still carried the wrong central argument. "Why?" "Because it's almost midnight." She shook her head once, slow and final. "Why wasn't it you?" The hallway went very quiet. Somewhere below us, a radiator ticked. "What?" She stepped closer. The coat shifted on her shoulders. One of my cuffs brushed the back of her hand. "Why weren't you the one who took me out?" I reached for the safest sentence I owned, the one I had rehearsed in a dozen quieter versions over the last year. "You were dating Ryan." "Tonight, yes." Her voice stayed level, almost gentle. "I'm asking about the last 2 years." I knew every professional boundary speech by heart. I had practiced them on nights I came home later than I should have from helping her finish work that was never officially mine. "Because we work together." Sophie almost smiled. It didn't come close to her eyes. "You know my coffee order without asking. You remember the anniversary of my mother's death and never make me explain why that week is harder. You stayed until 2 in the morning rebuilding an entire presentation you weren't even assigned to, and you never once put your name on the file." She had to stop and breathe around the next part. "But asking me to dinner was where professionalism suddenly mattered?" "I didn't know you wanted me to." The look she gave me landed harder than the empty table at the restaurant. "You notice everything, Daniel." "Don't insult me by pretending you never noticed that." I could have told her the truth then. I could have said I had been in love with her for almost a year, that I could mark the exact week it stopped being something I could fold up and put away. Instead, I asked the single most damaging question available to a man still more afraid of being a rebound than of losing her for good. Would you be saying this if Ryan had shown up? Sophie's face closed the way a shared document closes when the wrong person tries to take edit access. She slipped my coat off her shoulders with careful hands and held it out between us. That's why it was never you. The door shut. The lock turned with a soft, decisive sound. I stood in the hallway with her shoes in one hand and my own coat still carrying the faint shape and warmth of her, and understood that I had just taken the closest thing to a confession I might ever receive and turned it into a cross-examination. If you have ever walked someone home after the person they trusted failed to appear, only to have them ask why it was never you, and then watched yourself answer with a test instead of the truth, stay with me. Hit like if that closed door already feels heavier than wood and paint and a single-turned lock. And tell me in the comments the last time you protected yourself so carefully that you accidentally protected yourself from the very thing you wanted most. I read every one. 3 weeks earlier, Sophie had handed me her phone and asked me to recover one missing file. What appeared on that screen was the reason she ended up crying outside her apartment, and the reason she no longer trusted the man who had spent 2 years noticing everything except the moment it was safe to speak. 3 weeks earlier, the only thing Sophie had asked me to recover was a single voice memo. We were the last 2 people left on the floor. The office had that late evening quiet that makes every keyboard sound personal. Sophie's phone had crashed after a system update, and taken with it the interview recording she needed for a client presentation at 9 the next morning. I had handled data migrations for the team before, so she unlocked the screen, typed her password in plain view, and slid the phone across the desk. Just the voice memo and the notes folder if they come back, she said. Nothing else. I started the restore and turned my attention back to my own laptop. That was the plan. While the progress bar crawled, notification banners began stacking at the top of her screen from numbers she had not saved. I was not trying to read them. The phone was face up between us, and the previews were large. Are you Ryan Cole's girlfriend? He sent me the exact same photo last month. Please tell me you already know. One of the messages expanded far enough to show a screenshot. Ryan. The same black and white portrait Sophie kept in a hidden album, and underneath it, the line he had once texted her at 1:14 a.m. I've never felt this way about anyone before. Now addressed to someone else. I stopped the restore. I did not open the full conversation. I did not search his name. I turned the phone around and slid it back so the screen faced her. Something came through while it was syncing, I said. You need to look at it yourself. Sophie read the previews. Her face did the careful blank thing it did in client meetings when a stakeholder said something indefensible. Then she locked the phone and set it face down. How long have you been waiting for something like this? I wasn't waiting. You're in love with me. It was not a question. I could have lied. I had become very good at the professional version of the truth. Instead, I said the only word that would not make the rest of the night a performance. Yes. The air between us changed temperature. So I'm supposed to believe this has nothing to do with jealousy? My feelings don't change what appeared on your phone. But all she seemed to hear was that the person she trusted most at work had been carrying a secret for a year, while still sitting beside her on late nights, still remembering the hard anniversaries, still making himself available in every way, except the one that would have required him to risk being told no. She gathered her laptop and the ruined phone. I need to think. She did not look at me when she said it. The spare key to her apartment, the one she had given me 8 months earlier so I could feed her cat during a conference, landed on my desk with a small final sound. Then she left. The next 3 weeks were conducted entirely in the language of project timelines and shared drives. No more lunch. No more draft swaps. No more 11 p.m. calls when a deck refused to make sense. I sent one message on the third day. You don't have to believe me, but please verify it before you decide anything permanent. After that, I stopped reaching out. I told myself that if the truth mattered, she would find it without me standing over her shoulder. What I did not admit until much later was that part of me was also relieved. As long as she stayed angry at me, I did not have to face the quieter possibility that she might look at the evidence, accept it, and still not choose me. Most of what I'm telling you happened the way I'm saying it. A few of the smaller edges have been shaped so the feeling stays clear. Some of the messages on that phone belong to women who never asked to be part of anyone else's story. But the moment the notifications stacked up between us was real. The way her face closed when I answered yes was real. The sound of the spare key hitting my desk was real. If any part of telling the truth and watching it get filed under jealousy is already sitting with you, you're not alone in the empty office. Stay with me. I spent those 3 weeks doing the only thing I knew how to do well. I stayed quiet. I hit every deadline. And I tried not to calculate how much of my life had been organized around a woman who now crossed the floor without meeting my eyes. I did not know yet that the real test was still coming, or that when it arrived, it would not look like a second chance. It would look like a phone call at 9:47 p.m. and a long walk home in the rain. The 3 weeks that followed were conducted in the careful dialect of people who used to know each other. Sophie answered every work message within the hour. She sat across from me in status meetings and looked at the shared screen instead of my face. When a client deck needed another set of eyes, she sent it to Marcus or Priya. The spare key stayed in my desk drawer like a small, polite accusation. I did not try to return it. Returning it would have required a conversation, and every conversation had become a place where the wrong sentence could finish what the phone notifications had started. I replayed the moment more times than was useful. The progress bar, the stack of unknown numbers, the screenshot of Ryan's face above a sentence I had watched Sophie smile at months earlier. My own voice saying yes when she asked if I was in love with her. In the version of the night that lived in my head, I found a cleaner way to hand her the truth, one that did not also hand her the knowledge that the messenger had been waiting, quietly and without permission, for the relationship to fail. In the actual version, I had simply been honest, and honesty had arrived wearing the exact clothes jealousy wears. Sophie tested the evidence the way she tested copy. Thoroughly, skeptically, looking for the angle that would let the original story remain intact. Ryan had explanations ready. The other women were bitter exes. The screenshots had been edited. I was inventing a crisis because I wanted her and had finally seen an opening. Each explanation was plausible if you needed it to be. I watched her reach for them and said nothing. I had already used up my one chance to speak without it sounding like a campaign. On the 12th day, she passed me in the kitchen and paused long enough to say, "I talked to him. It's handled." Her voice left no room for follow-up. I nodded and went back to my coffee. That night, I deleted the draft of a message that began with, "If you ever want to look at the timestamps together." Deleting it felt like the first adult decision I had made in weeks. What I could not delete was the quieter damage. For nearly a year, I had organized small parts of my life around the possibility of Sophie. Not in the dramatic way, in the ordinary way. Leaving Thursdays open in case a project ran late and she needed a second brain. learning the name of her cat's medication, remembering which anniversary made her go silent for a day. None of those things had been asked for. All of them had been offered under the cover of friendship. When she withdrew the friendship, the offers had nowhere to land. I discovered how much of my steadiness had been built on the assumption that I would keep being allowed to stand nearby. I did not contact the other women. I did not ask mutual acquaintances what they knew. I did not perform the role of the man who had been right. I went to work, hit my dates, and practiced the unfamiliar discipline of letting someone I loved walk into a story I could not edit for her. Most of what I'm telling you happened the way I'm saying it. A few of the smaller edges have been shaped, so the feeling stays true. The exact wording of Ryan's explanations belongs to the private negotiations of a relationship I was never inside. But the returned key was real. The 12 days of perfect professional courtesy were real. The moment I deleted the message about timestamps was real. If any part of watching someone you love choose the softer story, and choosing not to chase them with a harder one, is already sitting with you, you're not alone in the quiet office. Stay with me. By the end of the third week, I had almost convinced myself that the worst had already happened. I had told the truth, lost the daily ship of her, and survived. I did not know that the real collapse was still scheduled, that it would arrive on a Thursday night with a restaurant reservation, a 40-minute wait, and a stranger walking up to Sophie's table to ask if she was also waiting for Ryan. I only knew that the space where her name used to appear on my phone had gone dark, and that I had no right to be the one who turned the light back on. The call came at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I was home, half working through a status report I already knew by heart, when Sophie's name lit the screen. 3 weeks of silence had trained me not to expect it. I answered on the second ring. "Can you come get me?" No explanation, no apology, no preamble about whether I was still willing. I said the only sentence that mattered. "I'm on my way." She was standing under the awning of the restaurant where she and Ryan had their first date. The same blue dress from the photographs she had once shown me when the relationship still looked promising. Her arms were crossed tight against the evening chill. When she saw me, she didn't smile or cry. She just walked toward the curb like someone who had finished a long, necessary conversation and had nothing left to perform. We didn't get in a car. She shook her head when I opened the rideshare app. So we walked again, the same damp Philadelphia sidewalks, the same unhurried pace. This time, she talked. Ryan had promised a reset, dinner at the original restaurant, a conversation about meeting her parents, a future that would finally be public and official. She had arrived early. She had texted him when he was 10 minutes late, then 20. At the 40-minute mark, a woman she had never seen before approached the table and asked, almost kindly, if she was also waiting for Ryan Cole. Natalie was a nurse. She had been seeing Ryan for nearly a year. She had the same photographs, the same late-night voice notes, the same line about never feeling this way before. While they were still comparing timelines, Natalie's phone rang. Aaron, on video, sitting in a different city with the same stunned expression. 3 women, 1 set of promises. The same man who had told each of them they were the only serious one. Sophie did not need me to explain what it meant. She had already called Ryan from the restaurant bathroom. She had listened to the first 30 seconds of his defense, ended the call, and blocked the number. The performance was over. What remained was the walk home, and the question of who, if anyone, she was still willing to let stand beside her. I did not say I had tried to warn her. I did not ask whether she believed me now. I did not offer the speech about her deserving better. I listened while she laid the facts out in the clean, chronological order she used for client decks. And when she finished, I said the only true thing that didn't ask for anything in return. "I'm glad you called." She looked at me sideways. "That's all?" "That's all I get to say tonight without turning this into something you have to manage." We covered the last 6 blocks in silence. At her building, she stopped under the same flickering hallway light. I handed her the heels I had been carrying since 18th Street. She took them, then looked at the coat still draped over my arm, the one she had returned 3 weeks earlier. "Keep it for a minute," she said. "I'm cold." I settled it around her shoulders again. The gesture felt different this time, less like caretaking, more like something she had decided to allow. At the door, she didn't ask me in. She also didn't tell me to leave. She just stood there with the key in her hand and the night air moving between us. 2 people who had finally run out of the old protective scripts and had not yet written new ones. If you have ever been the person who got the late call after the truth arrived without you, and you chose to show up without collecting on the fact that you were right, stay with me. Hit like if that quiet walk already feels more important than any speech you could have given. And tell me in the comments the last time you loved someone enough to let them finish their own reckoning. I read every one. Sophie unlocked the door, stepped inside, and looked back once. The coat was still on her shoulders. The question she had asked me 3 weeks earlier in this same hallway was still unanswered. But for the first time, the silence between us didn't feel like punishment. It felt like the small, necessary space required before either of us could speak without trying to win. The second closed door of that night stayed closed for 6 full weeks. Sophie did not text to return the coat. She did not appear at my desk with a carefully worded thaw. She came to work, delivered every project on time, and treated me with the same professional courtesy she extended to the rest of the floor. The difference was that this silence had a different temperature. It was no longer the freeze of someone who felt ambushed. It was the deliberate quiet of someone rebuilding the floor under her own feet before she invited anyone else to stand on it. I learned the outline of those weeks only later, in pieces she chose to offer. She started therapy. She wrote short, direct messages to Natalie and Aaron, apologizing for the days she had spent half suspecting them of fabrication. She blocked Ryan on every platform that still allowed it, and did not answer when he appeared once outside the office with flowers and a speech about fear of commitment. She told him, in the same clear voice she used with difficult clients, that she was not leaving because someone else had been right. She was leaving because she had finally stopped asking him to become a person his choices had already disproved. She also redrew the boundary with me. No more late-night draft swaps. No more spare key-level access to her life. The friendship, if it was going to exist again, would have to be rebuilt at a pace she controlled, and without the old asymmetry of me always being the one who showed up already prepared to help. I respected the distance because anything else would have turned my earlier restraint into a performance. I still loved her. That fact had not become less true just because it had become more expensive. But loving her no longer included the right to stand closest to the damage. On a Thursday in the 7th week, she sent a calendar invite for coffee at a place neither of us used for work. Neutral ground. Daylight. Public enough that neither of us could mistake it for a continuation of the hallway conversation. She spoke first. "I accused you of inventing a crisis because you wanted me. That was unfair. The evidence was real. My refusal to look at it was about protecting a story I needed, not about anything you did with the information. I had prepared several versions of a reply. I used the shortest one. I kept a year of feelings quiet while still arranging my life around the possibility of you. That made every true thing I said land like a strategy. I'm sorry for the part of this that was tangled up in my own timing. Sophie turned her cup in slow circles. If I asked you the same question now, the one I asked at the door, would the answer be different? You shouldn't ask again unless you're ready for a real answer instead of a test. She met my eyes. I wouldn't be sitting here if I weren't ready. The silence that followed was the first one in months that didn't feel like a held breath. She didn't fill it with explanations about rebound timelines or the exact percentage of her heart that was available. I didn't fill it with reassurances that I could be patient forever. We simply sat inside the fact that the question had been asked again, this time without the wreckage of a single night pressed against it. Sophie set her cup down. I'm asking you to dinner, not as a thank you, not because you were right about Ryan, not because I need someone safe while I finish being angry. I'm asking because I've spent 2 years measuring every man I dated against the way I felt when I was simply in a room with you. And I'm done pretending the measurement was accidental. I could have turned the invitation into something smaller and safer. I had a lifetime of practice at that particular edit. Instead, I said the only sentence that kept the moment level with the truth she had just put on the table. I'd like that. She nodded once, as if we had just closed a difficult revision and both agreed the new version was stronger. Friday. I'll send the address. And Daniel. Yeah? Don't show up early and wait outside like you're still managing the risk. Just come to dinner. I smiled for the first time in weeks. I can do that. We left the cafe separately. The coat she still hadn't returned stayed in my hall closet. The spare key stayed in my desk. Nothing had been restored to its previous shape. Something quieter and more deliberate had been allowed to begin instead. 3 months is long enough for a new rhythm to stop feeling like a performance and start feeling like the actual shape of a life. We dated the way people date when both of them have already seen how silence and good intentions can curdle. No late-night rescues framed as romance. No keeping score of who had been right about Ryan. No treating my earlier steadiness as a down payment Sophie was now obligated to honor. We learned each other's ordinary preferences. The way she ordered coffee when she was nervous. The way I went quiet when a project turned political. And we practiced saying the small, true things before they hardened into larger ones. The coat stayed in my closet until the 3rd week, when she asked for it back because the evenings had turned cold again. She returned it a month later without ceremony, cleaned and folded. The spare key remained in my desk. We did not discuss its eventual return. Some thresholds, we were learning, are better crossed when both people are looking at them from the same side. On a Thursday night in early autumn, I walked her home after dinner. The same route, the same building, the same slightly flickering hallway light. Sophie stopped at her door, keys already in her hand, and looked at me with the expression she used when a piece of copy had finally found its right ending. Do you remember what I asked you here? Why I wasn't the one who took you out? And? I had spent 3 months refusing to treat that original question as a test I needed to pass. Standing in the same place, I finally had an answer that didn't require her to prove anything first. Because I was so afraid of being the wrong choice that I never gave you the chance to make one. I told myself I was respecting the fact that you were with someone else. What I was actually doing was protecting myself from the possibility that you might look at me clearly and still say no. It was safer to be the reliable one in the background than to risk being seen and refused. That wasn't restraint. It was fear dressed up as principle. Sophie studied my face for a long moment. The hallway was quiet enough that I could hear the soft electronic hum of the lock. Good answer. She unlocked the door, then turned back before stepping inside. Do I get to come in? Her mouth tilted. That depends. On what? Whether you're still going to make me prove I know what I want. I stepped closer, close enough that the old instinct to manage the moment tried to surface, and I let it pass without acting on it. No more cross-examinations. Sophie reached out, took a fistful of my jacket, and pulled me across the threshold. The door closed behind us with the same soft, decisive sound it had made the night everything collapsed. This time both of us were on the inside of it. The night Sophie was stood up, I believed that loving her meant getting her home safely and asking for nothing in return. I was only half right. Love also meant trusting that a person could be hurt, disoriented, and still capable of knowing her own heart. She did not choose me because Ryan failed to appear. She chose herself first, through the verification, the ending, the 6 deliberate weeks, the clear invitation that refused every softer interpretation. Only after that did she choose me. We did not become each other's reward for surviving someone else's failure. We became 2 people who had finally stopped using caution as a substitute for courage and silence as a substitute for care. The door that had once closed on a question asked too soon and answered too defensively was the same door that opened when the question was asked again, cleanly, by a woman who no longer needed me to be right in order to let me stay. If you walked all the way from a pair of high heels carried through damp Philadelphia streets to a second chance at the same door, thank you. Some thresholds only become passable when both people have stopped treating the other's feelings as evidence that requires cross-examination. If these pages sat with you, leave a like so I know the hallway light was shared. Subscribe if you want the next one. And if you feel like speaking, tell me about a time you almost protected yourself out of the very thing you wanted, and what it finally took to put the questions down. I read every word. The spare key is back on her ring now. Some nights, when I unlock the door after dark, I still feel the ghost of that first closed door in the mechanism. It no longer feels like a verdict. It feels like the place we both had to stand before either of us was ready to step through.